fallout continues for rap mogul Sean Diddy Combs tonight as more companies announce they've cut ties with the bad boy CEO.
Several law enforcement agencies are raiding the home of hip-hop mogul P. Diddy.
A new civil lawsuit against Sean Diddy Combs accuses him of sex trafficking.
You know him as Diddy, formerly Puff Daddy, big-time rapper, big-time superstar, and now the feds at his houses in both locations.
It's like a tapestry of criminal activity.
We are hearing from Homeland Security.
I want to declare that the career of Sean P. Diddy Combs is over.
When you have multitudes of people lining up, all making the same or nearly identical allegations, it becomes much more powerful.
I'm trying to party, dude.
Who you trying to party? Like Diddy?
Like Diddy?
Trying to party?
What do you mean? What does that mean?
I actually don't know.
Rap mogul Sean Puffy Combs pleaded not guilty today to charges stemming from a nightclub shooting. Combs was arraigned on charges of criminal possession of a handgun.
On December 27, 1999, the NYPD responded to an incident that occurred on West 43rd Street in Times Square. At around 3 o'clock in the morning, gunshots rang out in Manhattan's very own Club New York, leaving numerous innocent bystanders in dire need of medical attention. Authorities reached the scene of the crime and arrested 21-year-old Jamal Barrow, a young, up-and-coming rapper known professionally as Shine, who had just signed to Bad Boy Records only a few months prior. But the man who signed him was nowhere to be found. Despite arriving with Shine that night, Sean Puff Daddy Combs was attempting to flee the club in a brand new Lincoln Navigator, leaving Shine alone to be charged with 3 counts of attempted murder and criminal possession of a weapon. It was reported that Diddy's driver sped through 11 separate red lights that night, flying down 8th Avenue past 2 parked police cars before finally being pulled over. Officers were quick to find 2 9mm pistols inside the vehicle, prompting them to arraign all 4 passengers, which included Diddy's then-girlfriend, Jennifer Lopez. One former detective recalling how J-Lo's mother was yelling at her in Spanish over the phone by the time they arrived at the Manhattan South Police Precinct, telling the New York Post she was really mad at Jennifer. I heard her say, "I told you not to get involved with him."
An officer testified that everyone in the SUV was ordered to put their hands on the vehicle, but Lopez walked away, saying she was going home. As she was being detained, a gun was discovered in the vehicle. The officer quotes Lopez as saying, "It's not my gun."
After 60 witnesses, 126 court exhibits, and 25 years of retrospect, the actual events leading up to this infamous shootout remain tragically unclear, though most accounts say Diddy was arguing with a man named Scar, who, annoyed by Diddy's relentless flexing, threw a pile of money in the record executive's face as a sign of disrespect. One clubgoer by the name of Natania Rubin testified she heard Scar threaten to kill Shine shortly before she says she witnessed both Shine and Diddy pull out weapons and begin firing. Natania then felt what she described as a flaming hot sledgehammer shattering her face. She had been shot.
As I turned back to look at them, I watched them bow bow. Both of them fired, and the muzzle flash was like psh, psh. Shine's muzzle flash was a little higher. He was on the side closest to the bar. Puffy's muzzle flash was a little lower, and he was on the side closest to where I was, straight ahead from me. I watched them both fire their guns. I watched them.
Natania was just one of 3 victims that night, and while there were thankfully no casualties, there were still countless questions that needed to be answered. To what extent was everyone involved? Well, J-Lo was exonerated almost instantly. In fact, authorities cleared her of any wrongdoing after just 14 hours in the pen. She was never charged. Her boyfriend Diddy, on the other hand, was slapped with 4 weapons charges for the pistols found in his Navigator, and was even charged for attempted bribery when the driver testified Diddy offered him $50,000 to say the guns were his. Diddy even reportedly presented a $40,000 ring as collateral.
This afternoon, jurors asked for a transcript of a phone message Combs left Wardell Fenderson, once his driver, now the prosecution's star witness.
And I just want to make you feel like comfortable, you know what I'm saying? Make your family feel comfortable.
What exactly Combs meant by that is in dispute, but the prosecution claims the rapper offered Fenderson $50,000.
After a very tense and extremely public 6-month trial, however, Diddy was acquitted on all charges, while his protege Shine received a 10-year prison sentence, despite Natanya, the victim, maintaining since day one it was Diddy who shot her in the face, not Shine, who she says only fired his gun at the ceiling. In a recent interview with News Nation, Natanya reiterated, "I literally watched them all pull out the guns. I had a clear point of view. I mean, for God's sake, I got shot in my nose. I was facing them directly. I watched everything occur and have described it vehemently to all parties involved. Who better to tell you what happened than the person who got shot smack dab in between my eyes?" Natanya is in fact so adamant that she's since offered to have the bullet fragments removed from her skull for ballistic evidence should the case ever be reopened. Ever since that life-altering verdict, Natanya has insisted that Shine was the fall guy, a term literally used by Shine himself after leaving jail. As much as Shine has made an effort to grow and change as a person, distancing himself from his troubled past by becoming the leader of the Belize Democratic Party in recent years, yeah, his dad is the former prime minister of Belize, by the way, no big deal, Shine has recently opened up about his role in that fateful club shooting during an interview with Channel 5 Belize. In reference to Natanya's claims, Shine stated, "It opens wounds when you hear the victim saying that it was Diddy who shot her. Everyone knew all along that I was the fall guy. My political enemies and detractors try to make me into this criminal, but everyone knew that I was just a young kid that took the fall. Everyone knew that was the story. I'm just saying that I've maintained my innocence all this time." While he doesn't explicitly say he took the fall for Diddy, he does make sure to emphasize what Natanya is telling us, saying, "I didn't get into who did what, but the victim is telling you who did what. Fragments were never removed, so there was never any forensic testing to say who it was, but the victims are vindicating me," clarifying once and for all that he's moved on and that he doesn't want to relive those tragic experiences. So why discuss any of this now? Well, it all stems from a recent lawsuit filed this February by producer and Diddy collaborator Lil Rod, who has come out with a laundry list of allegations against his former creative partner, which we will be exploring extensively throughout this video. But what I want to focus on first is what these court filings say about the 1999 incident. On page 25 of the 73-page lawsuit, it is stated that Diddy bragged to Lil Rod about getting away with it shooting people, sharing that he was responsible for the shooting in the nightclub in New York City with rapper Shine, and that J-Lo carried the gun into the club for him and passed him the gun after he got into an altercation with another individual. Lil Rod's assertion that Diddy bragged about bribing witnesses and jurors in the criminal case concerning the 1999 shooting lines up perfectly with Natanya's own recollection of events that she has never once deviated from.
Even the surgeon who did my surgery to take out part of the bullet fragments that was aspirating into my lungs and try to remove as many bullet fragments as possible testified in the criminal trial that while they were putting me under, I was screaming, "Puffy, pew pew me in the face."
But as mentioned, this is far from the only concerning allegation against Sean P. Diddy Combs. In fact, there are entire decades of those, with the most recent wave of lawsuits being the most shocking and disgusting of all. Which is why today we'll be going through all of these stories, presenting them as cohesively as possible here in this video. It's gonna be a long one, and I don't doubt it will get pretty dark. While Diddy has yet to be charged for anything connected to the recent flurry of allegations against him, I think it's important we know what exactly he's currently facing in order to get a better sense of who he is and where he may go from here. But in order for that to happen, we need to start a little further back. Diddy, P. Diddy, Puff Daddy, Puffy, whatever you want to call him, has existed in the cultural zeitgeist for a minute now. In fact, he's remained a prominent figure in American pop culture since the early 90s. But I want to venture back to when he was nothing more than a young boy from Mount Vernon. Born in Harlem in 1967, Sean Combs was raised by a single mother in New York following the murder of his father in the early 70s. He attended a Catholic boys' school throughout his adolescence before eventually enrolling at Washington, D.C.'s Howard University during the late 80s. Initially seeking a business degree, Diddy spent most of his time driving around in his convertible and throwing rowdy parties that one former student described as a once-in-a-lifetime type vibe to Rolling Stone. Not all of his former classmates look back on Diddy so fondly, though, with another another former student telling the magazine she kept as far away as possible from the rapper after he allegedly caressed her back without consent and asked if she wanted to meet his friend, alluding to Diddy's creepier, volatile side by recalling how he flew off the handle when she confronted him for cutting her off in the cafeteria line, with yet another student describing how Diddy would persistently tap on the classroom window to get his girlfriend to ditch class. Noticing how she would tense up whenever Diddy appeared, the student told Rolling Stone he just had a weird control thing. I felt like she was fearful, though his stint at Howard wouldn't last long, ultimately dropping out to pursue a career in music before starting his sophomore year, never to return to the school again until 2014 when they gave him an honorary doctorate, which it turns out was a pretty controversial move even back then. Several students at the time expressed frustration over the fact Diddy was getting special treatment when he only spent about a year actually enrolled, which is fair. I don't really know what Diddy could have brought to a commencement speech for a school he never got close to graduating from, but none of that matters now because they've since revoked his honorary doctorate in the wake of, well, everything horrible that's come out against him.
The university also made the decision to return Combs' $1 million contribution and terminate a $1 million pledge agreement from the Sean Combs Foundation.
But that was all way before he became established in the music scene. The way Diddy first got his foot in the door was by becoming an intern at Uptown Records, one of the oldest hip-hop labels whose roster once included the likes of Mary J. Blige, Father MC, Heavy D and the Boys, and of course, the notorious B.I.G. Needless to say, this is where Diddy began forming some of his earliest friendships in the industry, gradually working his way up to talent director and eventually to vice president of the entire company. That is until a falling out with the CEO, Andre Harrell, modestly telling Oprah Winfrey years later that the reason Andre fired him was because there can't be two kings in one castle. I don't presume that was the exact reason he got fired, but that's what he tells people. Still, the connections he made through Uptown would ultimately serve him well in 1993 when he launched his own label, Bad Boy Entertainment, just weeks after leaving his old job, signing Biggie immediately, which ended up being a huge blow to Uptown after the massive success of Biggie's critically acclaimed debut album, Ready to Die, in 1994. Throughout the early to mid-90s, Diddy continued to build his reputation as a record executive and producer by working with esteemed artists such as Mariah Carey, Mace, TLC, Method Man, Aretha Franklin, and so many others, seeing his company generate over $100 million in record sales by 1997. But this was also the decade where Diddy's illustrious history of legal problems began to mount.
A year has passed since the CCNY tragedy, but people have not forgotten what happened, including the event's promoter, 22-year-old Sean Puffy Combs.
In fact, we can go all the way back to 1991, before the Bad Boy days, to find examples of Diddy's first controversies, which it feels like a disservice to even call them that because these are actual crimes, not so much controversies. Organizing and promoting a city college basketball event marked Diddy's first bad decision, as stated by Jason Swain, whose brother was unfortunately crushed to death during a tragic stampede that occurred that night. Dirk Swain was just one of 9 people who lost their lives in that school, not to mention the dozens of other patrons that were injured as a result of the event being massively overbooked. A 67-page report carried out by New York City Mayor David Dinkins concluded that despite having a capacity of 2,700 people, the gym filled up to over 5,000 people as a result of non-ticket holders being allowed inside. The report criticized those in charge of the event for making a litany of mistakes and neglecting their duties at every stage of planning, according to a New York Times article from 1992. While we don't know what specifically led up to the crowd crush that transpired, we do know that once attendees were barred from entering, the people who were left outside stormed the gates of the gym and rushed into the lobby. According to the report, the only open door at the bottom of the gym somehow became shut, creating a deadly steel barrier to the surging crowd as outlined by the Times. A nightmare that I can't even begin to imagine. One victim by the name of Sharice Miles recalled to the New York Post how we were just chest to chest for hours. At one point, there was this rush inside, and that's when you saw bodies dropping. People were getting trampled, it was chaos. But that was never much of a concern to Diddy, you know, the guy who organized the event, who Sharice says walked right past me after there was this big rush into the gym and didn't seem concerned about what was going on. He just wanted to get his stuff and get out of there. I never got the sense of remorse or accountability, just like, let me get my stuff and get out. What's interesting to me is that the mayor's report, which you can read for free on the Wayback Machine, describes Diddy's initial plans of arranging a celebrity basketball game featuring rap artists in order to raise concern over the AIDS crisis. He then promptly called up an associate by the name of Tara Jeter to hammer out the details with the school. A contract was drafted up, and Diddy didn't even really bother to read it, despite it pinning a lot of responsibility on him as the contractor of the event, requiring him to buy insurance, which of course he didn't do. While a lot of the report spends time criticizing the school and police department, 2 entire pages are dedicated to the failure of responsibility by Sean Combs, citing that as a known promoter of rap concerts and other functions, he is fully aware of the need for proper preparation and coordination of such events, particularly with regard to the need of adequate security. In this instance, Mr. Combs spent little time making the actual preparation for the game and delegated most, if not all, of the arrangements to those who claim to have no prior experience with such events. The report also acknowledges how Diddy promoted the hell out of this thing, plugging it repeatedly over the radio on Kiss FM, and knowing that over 1,000 tickets had already been sold in advance. They were already at half capacity, and Diddy was still trying to get as many people there as possible, without even making adequate arrangements with security. According to the report, the security situation was an absolute mess, with hired personnel having little to no understanding of their designated roles. It also faults Diddy for, evidently, not communicating with the AIDS education outreach program despite listing the organization on flyers, assuring ticket holders that donations would be made to that organization. It was marketed as a charity basketball event after all. Only the leader of the charity says they were never approached regarding any monetary donations. As outlined by the report, Diddy's assertion that the proceeds were being donated was in error, meaning nobody quite knows what happened to that $24,000 the event raised for charity. There were also a number of settlements that Diddy was required to pay. Throughout the 90s, Diddy paid about $600,000 collectively to the victims' families, or roughly $75,000 per death, settling the last suit in the year 2000, according to Rolling Stone. The New York Post emphasized the frustration of these families, who blamed Diddy for resisting accountability and never officially apologizing to them. Dirk Swain's mother, Barbara, telling the Daily News in 1998 that she didn't think he'd ever taken true accountability, though he did reference the tragedy in a song, rapping it to the City College deceased, may you rest in peace. To the families, I never meant to cause pain. I know the truth, but if you want, then I'll shoulder the blame. Mrs. Swain called these lyrics stupid, asking what is he saying? Is he saying he's not to blame? Adding, we're not saying the blame is all his, but not once did he step up to the plate and say, yes, I am responsible.
Then Combs has maintained a low profile in the press, which he feels has wrongly portrayed him.
I'm famous for like the kid in their minds who through the tragic City College, and that's kind of hard for me sometimes to live with.
I think you can see by now that the 90s were a pretty tumultuous period for Diddy. He wasn't just making headlines for his mismanagement of charity basketball events, he was also routinely getting into violent clashes with fellow industry executives, like the time he caught his first assault charge in 1999 following the accidental release of a Nas music video for the song Hate Me Now. Directed by Hype Williams, the infamous video featured controversial depictions of Diddy and Nas carrying large wooden crosses on their backs, being flogged by an angry mob before being pinned down and crucified on those crosses. This thing remained lost media for over 20 years until 2022, when a user named HipHopVCR posted the entire music video in full on Patreon. And sure enough, it literally shows nails being driven through Diddy and Nas's hands. Diddy, being raised in the Catholic Church, had a long talk with his priest shortly before the release of the video and decided he no longer wanted his crucifixion scene included. Only by the time he came to that decision, it was pretty late in the process, and Steve Stout, Nas's manager, was reluctant to make the change considering A, he had already sunk 14 grand into the scene, and B, the crucifixion was Diddy's idea in the first place. Either way, the uncut music video aired on national television April 15th, 1999. And according to XXL, it was only a matter of minutes before Diddy and his bodyguards burst into Steve's office to violently assault him, clubbing him over the head with a champagne bottle in front of 2 clients. As Steve recalled to the LA Times all the way back in 1999, one minute I'm in the middle of a meeting and the next minute I'm down on the floor and Puffy and his guys are kicking and pounding me. One of them picks up a chair and throws it at me. Then Puffy throws my desk and they just walk out like nothing happened. My jaw and my head were all swollen. It was a traumatic experience, and in the middle of it, I didn't know exactly how to feel. I was upset, embarrassed, scared, angry. As far as I'm concerned, this was an attempt on my life. Also, telling the New York Post at the time, I'm scared of him, despite Steve standing 6 feet tall and weighing over 300 pounds, as the Post mentions. But I have to defend the record industry. It's the record industry versus Sean P. Diddy Combs, he added. Everybody is afraid of him. He has a dark history. Almost instantly, Diddy was arrested, criminally charged, and faced up to 7 years in prison until Steve had a change of heart and asked the DA's office to drop the charges once Diddy apologized. Issuing an apology is an otherwise rare move for Diddy, but I guess he would have done or said anything in this instance to avoid 7 years behind bars. And I gotta say, the fact that people like Steve were speaking publicly about the dangerous side of Sean Combs 25 years ago says a lot. His abusive past has always been one of the industry's worst kept secrets. In fact, in 2001, a Detroit talk show host by the name of Roger Mills filed a lawsuit that accused Diddy and his entourage of assault, false imprisonment, destruction of property, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and a civil conspiracy, according to a 23-year-old article from Billboard. This lawsuit was reportedly filed around 2 years after Diddy and Roger filmed an interview in which the latter asked Diddy to comment on speculation that he had something to do with the death of his longtime associate Biggie Smalls. Refusing to answer the question, Diddy ended the interview right there and demanded it never be aired, even offering to buy the videotape of that interview through someone else. But when Roger refused, he was attacked in the parking lot on the way back to his car. He claims Diddy's bodyguards prevented him from leaving before forcibly taking the videotape from him, breaking his camera in the process, and twisting his neck and shoulder in the assault. While Diddy was forced to appear in court, he testified that he didn't remember the incident. Despite Detroit police being able to confirm that an incident did in fact take place, the jury quickly ruled in favor of Diddy, which was not unlike another instance in 2004 when a judge overturned a civil judgment calling on Diddy to pay almost $500,000 to a limo driver who claims he was assaulted by security detail Diddy had hired to protect Mary J. Blige. Despite the driver, Cedric Bobby Lemon, literally wearing the necessary credentials to allow him backstage, he claims the 2 bodyguards punched him in the head, kicked him in the back, and broke his right ankle for absolutely zero reason. I mean, he was allowed to be there. And by the way, even if he wasn't supposed to be there, a reaction this brutal and violent wouldn't have been justified anyway. Being unable to work as a limo driver as a result of his injuries, Lemon was stuck with a $14,000 medical bill that he hoped the lawsuit would take care of. And although it may have taken a while, it appears the 2 parties did eventually reach a settlement in 2006, the details of which have never been disclosed. But I definitely hope this guy got a pretty big payout, considering Diddy's net worth topped $200 million at the time, according to Fortune magazine. This same article notes he was paying $112K a month for his son Justin's child support. Clearly, Diddy is not unfamiliar with controversy. He was in the news for this kind of thing all the time in the 90s and 2000s. Take, for example, a bloody altercation at an Atlanta club in 1995, where Diddy's longtime bodyguard Anthony Wolf Jones was involved in an argument between bi-coastal hip-hop group members from Bad Boy Entertainment and Death Row Records, Suge Knight's infamous record label that went on to sign Tupac Shakur. According to a 2001 report from the Los Angeles Times, an off-duty Fulton County sheriff by the name of Chris Howard, who had been working security detail at the club that night, witnessed both groups in a heated argument that included Diddy and Suge. It got so bad that Howard had to step in and break it up. Things calmed down for a second, only for another flare-up to occur, this time between Wolf and a man by the name of Big Jake Robles, a close friend of Suge. Howard then ordered the 2 groups to leave the club, making sure to keep Suge's party inside as Diddy's entourage cleared out. As Howard recalled, "I told Suge, okay, the coast is clear, and we walked outside and he got into the limo. His partner was just about ready to get into the limo when all of a sudden Puffy's guys came around the corner and one of them had a gun. I chased the guy with the gun around the corner. He handed the gun off to another guy. It was a .45. By the time I got back out front, that's when the guy took a shot at Suge's partner. He shot him 2 or 3 times, alleging he then saw the shooter jump into a car with Diddy's associates. The police arrived 15 minutes later, but at that point, the shooter was nowhere to be found. No weapon was ever recovered, and the victim, Jake Robles, died in the hospital a few weeks later. According to the LA Times, one witness recalled seeing Diddy's bodyguard, Wolf, pull the trigger. But that never really went anywhere. As this article points out, Diddy and Wolf were both standing trial in Manhattan on gun and bribery charges pertaining to the 1999 Club New York incident at the time this whole thing was being investigated again, which kind of took precedence in the media. To this day, Suge Knight still blames Diddy for what happened to his right-hand man. It's also important to point out here just how popular Diddy was at the time of all these disputes. Following the tragic and mysterious murder of Biggie, Diddy's tribute single I'll Be Missing You topped charts around the world and debuted at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, remaining in the #1 slot for 11 weeks, a record-breaking feat at the time. Diddy's mainstream celebrity status only continued to grow as his debut album, No Way Out, reached platinum status and sold 3.4 million physical copies in the United States alone. He earned a spot on the Forbes list and even clinched 2 Grammy wins in 1997, including Best Rap Album for No Way Out. His lifestyle was nothing short of lavish, kicking it with the likes of Martha Stewart and Donald Trump in the Hamptons. His sprawling empire of restaurants, magazines, and clothing, combined with his impressive record sales, reportedly generated an estimated $130 million in revenue per year, according to the LA Times. It's safe to say things were looking up for Sean Diddy Combs at the turn of the century, but unfortunately, that infamous track record we've talked about would prove pretty difficult for the mogul to escape. Before we go any further, I would like to go ahead and pause to thank today's sponsor, Fume. Fume is an award-winning flavored air device that uses plants and behavioral science to transform your bad habits into positive ones. Instead of using harmful or addictive chemicals, Fume's cores are infused with all-natural ingredients like peppermint and cinnamon, making for a tasty and enjoyable experience. With flavors like orange vanilla and raspberry lemon, Fume allows you to satisfy your oral fixation through a passive diffusion system that doesn't involve electronics or combustion. Not to mention the device feels super well weighted in your hand. Being perfectly balanced makes it easy to fidget with. Backed by US doctors, Fume continuously invests in third-party studies to ensure the utmost safety of their products, giving you peace of mind as you move away from bad habits. Fume has already served over 300,000 customers, and you can be their next success story. For a limited time, you can use my code JAWBRY to get your free Fume base when you order the Journey Pack. It's the all-new magnetic stand for your Fume device. Just head to tryfume.com/Jawbry, that's tryfum.com/Jawbry, and use code JAWBRY, or scan the QR code on screen now to get your free Fume base when you order your Journey Pack today. Huge thanks again to the amazing people at Fume for sponsoring this video.
This man is poised to become a star and has been taken under the wings of Ellie Reed and Sean Puffy Combs.
In August 2016, R&B icon Usher made an appearance on The Howard Stern Show, where he described some of his earliest years in the music industry. At just 15, Usher was already collaborating with established record executive Sean P. Diddy Combs, who was happy to co-produce the young artist's self-titled album in 1994. But that's not where the relationship ended. As Usher told Howard, he lived with the mogul for up to a year without his parents even knowing. Remember, he was a teenager at the time, and Diddy was well into his 20s. In fact, Diddy himself would later go on to claim he had legal custody over Usher during this time.
Been given custody of him. You know, he signed to Usher. I had legal guardianship of Usher when you know he did his first album. I did Usher's first album.
What we know for certain is that Usher has said Diddy introduced him to an entirely new world, one that was wildly inappropriate for someone as young as Usher was. In fact, in a 2004 interview with Rolling Stone, Usher revealed that Diddy had shown him a totally different set of shit specifically when it came to sex. Girls were always around, Usher explained. You'd open a door and see somebody doing it, or several people in a room having an orgy. You never knew what was going to happen. Fast forward 12 years, and Usher's testimony hasn't changed a bit, with Howard asking about something called a puffy flavor camp. No joke, that is actually a term coined by Diddy.
We're sending you over to something called Puffy Flavor Camp.
There you go.
To learn
Flavor
some...
camp?
Yeah,
Flavor
that's what it
camp.
was called.
I don't think I could come up with a more horrifying sequence of words if I tried. Puffy flavor camp? It sends shivers up my spine, it's so sinister. It was during this interview that Usher confirmed once more he got a chance to see some things by living with Diddy, and despite being a child, was exposed to an explicit lifestyle he couldn't understand.
Hey, it was curious. I got a chance to see some things.
Yeah, but you were 13. What were you seeing?
I went there to see the lifestyle.
Right.
And I saw it. And it was, but I don't know if I could indulge and understand what I was even looking at.
When Howard's co-host, Robin Quivers, attempts to ask whether or not girls would approach him at Diddy's house, Usher cuts her off before she can even get the question out, keeping it vague but insisting there were some curious things taking place.
So nobody tried to, some woman didn't come along.
I didn't say that.
Okay.
I didn't say that. What I did say is that there were very curious things taking place, and I didn't necessarily understand it.
Briefly touching on the wild parties before Howard finally asks if he'd ever send his own kids to Puffy Flavor Camp. And I think Usher's immediate response here really says it all.
You're a dad now. Would you ever send your kid to Puffy Camp?
Hell no.
See?
These quotes from Usher only resurfaced recently, around the same time as these videos featuring a 15-year-old Justin Bieber. As of today, you can actually still find this 14-year-old video up on Justin's YouTube channel, originally posted in November 2009, right as Justin was becoming a global sensation. The 2-minute video has generated headlines again due to it being an extremely uncomfortable watch. Ominously titled Justin Bieber's 48 Hours with Diddy. The first 30 seconds feature Diddy gifting the young pop star a brand new Lamborghini. He promises Justin that in a year, when he turns 16, this car is all his. And when he turns 18, he gets the giant mansion behind him.
You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna let you rock this every time you come in LA. Yeah, this gonna be yours. So every time you come in LA, it's a little dusty. Then when you get 18, you get the house. You get the mansion.
Okay, I get the mansion.
Yeah.
Justin asks where they're going, and when Diddy asks him where he wants to go, that's when it gets a little more awkward.
So where are we off to now?
Where would you like to go?
Wherever you want to go. Where are we going?
The way Justin stutters and stares into the camera with a sort of distant look on his face is already enough to raise eyebrows now, in retrospect, knowing the horrifying allegations that have been leveled against Diddy. But if you thought this video couldn't get any more uncomfortable, just wait. Diddy assures us that while Justin is having the time of his life, spending 48 hours with the mogul, he can't disclose what exactly it is they're getting up to. But he does promise that whatever it is, it's any 15-year-old's dream.
Where we hanging out and what we doing, we can't really disclose, but it's definitely a 15-year-old's dream, and given custody of him. He signed to Usher.
I'm signed to Usher.
The way Justin quickly reiterates that he's signed to Usher right here really strikes me as odd. He just comes across as afraid in this video, like there's something off about the entire thing. Justin looks like he's being held at gunpoint, even having to stand next to Diddy. Diddy then says they're gonna go buck full crazy for the next 48 hours, and asking Justin what he wants to do, this is how he answers.
48 hours, let's go, let's just go get some girls. Let's go hang with some girls.
A man after my heart, that's what I'm talking about.
With everything that's since come to light, it's hard to watch this and not feel creeped out. The implication that a grown man like Diddy is about to go out and help a teenager find girls is pretty perturbing on its face. Even if we want to be overly generous and say, oh, it was a bad joke or something, this isn't their only uncomfortable video together. In a follow-up that was posted to Diddy's channel the next year, we see Diddy borderline interrogating Justin, who is now 16, wondering why he hasn't been keeping in touch. He says he's been calling him and isn't sure why they don't hang out like they used to.
What's up, man? You good?
I'm good. How are you?
All right, young brother, everything's good?
Everything's
Selling
great.
out arenas and everything? Starting to act different, huh?
You ain't been calling me and hanging out the way we used to hang out.
Not sure what a 40-year-old would want with a 16-year-old exactly. I mean, what do you even talk about with a person half your age? And I will say, I've never seen Justin Bieber act this visibly anxious on camera before. And he's used to being on camera. It's kind of his entire existence. But here, he's stuttering again and swaying back and forth in a way that feels eerily authentic. There is, of course, a chance that they're doing some kind of weird bit, but again, it's just very hard for me to buy into that when we consider the mountain of allegations against Diddy that are now currently out there. If this were a kind of scripted promo for Diddy's album or something, I can't imagine what our takeaway is supposed to be other than genuine concern for Justin. His reaction doesn't feel like an act or a joke. This feels and looks too real to me. And of course, there is a very good reason these clips came back under scrutiny. We're all well aware at this point of why Diddy's legacy is being reconsidered, but I think it's time we finally delve into some of those details. And I will go ahead and offer a content warning here for graphic depictions of domestic abuse and SA. I think it's only fair I let you know now that the rest of this video may be pretty tough for some to sit through. While certain details may be censored, viewer discretion is certainly advised.
Did you party with Diddy a lot?
Oh, no, not really. I would go to the party and leave early.
That's why I don't be going to them puffy parties. They can hug you from the front and the back at the same time.
I don't know what goes on after hours, but
he wasn't trying to find out.
I wasn't trying to find out.
Look, if you're into that, I'm fine with it. It's his own. I'm just saying this ain't my motherfucking kind of party.
Because P. Diddy be wanting to party. And you gotta tell him no. You got to tell him no.
One recurring element that keeps popping up in these lawsuits is a reference to Diddy's freak-off parties, as he's termed them. While the details may vary case by case, we know from a swath of testimonies that Diddy was not unfamiliar with hosting hedonistic, drug-induced parties complete with female and male sex workers wearing masquerade masks. These would often take place at some of the most extravagant hotels in the country, as reported by Miami Herald journalist Julie K. Brown. Back in March, Brown described these freak-offs as sex parties so brutal that the young women and men lured into attending them would often vomit and pass out from being drugged, beaten, and raped, sometimes for hours on end.
What did Cassie tell you about these freak-offs?
You know, that he would hire these, like, sex workers and, like, they would have, you know, sex with her or whatever, and he would watch and tell them what to do.
When Diddy's longtime girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, filed her lawsuit back in November, she opened up about Diddy's constant need to have these freak-offs, or FOs, every week. He would decide on having one at random moments, according to the lawsuit, expecting Cassie to find the location and hire the sex workers herself. The lawsuit even goes on to name the exact hotels where these FOs would occur, with the hotels occasionally charging Diddy thousands of dollars in damages afterwards. Cassie's lawsuit goes into excruciating detail on how these encounters were arranged, alleging Diddy forced her to use websites and escort services to find male sex workers, specifically instructing her to search for terms like large black penises on the website, as the lawsuit asserts. He would often involve his assistants as well, asking they provide baby oil and Astroglide to the hotel suites, in addition to copious amounts of drugs that included ecstasy, cocaine, GHB, ketamine, marijuana, and alcohol that allowed Cassie to disassociate during such events where Diddy would masturbate to Cassie having intercourse with other inebriated sex workers. These FOs would sometimes last for days, according to Cassie, who says she needed to ingest IV fluids for an excessive period of time after the encounters in order to recover from all the substances her body was forced to endure.
That girl went through some tumultuous that she never thought that she would ever have to go through being in the music business.
For Diddy, this was all about power. He wanted total and utter control over the people he subjected to these FOs. He dictated every detail, from the lingerie Cassie wore down to the color of her nail polish, which he demanded must be white so it would, quote, contrast with the skin of the black men he hired to have sex with her, as the lawsuit alleges. The suit also makes it clear Diddy would direct the sexual encounters, specifically telling Cassie where he wanted her to touch the sex workers while he masturbated masturbated and filmed it. As the lawsuit put it, Diddy treated the forced encounter as a personal art project, adjusting the candles he used for lighting to frame the videos he took. It should also be emphasized that members of Diddy's staff were actively allowing these things to happen too, according to Cassie, as she recalls one alleged instance of being cornered by his security detail who forced her to leave her friends at her 29th birthday party to have a spontaneous FO with Diddy at a nearby hotel, despite expressing clearly to him that she did not want to go. When the pair then returned from the FO, Diddy, still being intoxicated, allegedly grabbed one of Cassie's friends, quote, like a child, and dangled the friend over the balcony of the 17th floor hotel suite. It's beyond clear that Diddy was a terrifying individual, both in status and temper. He wielded an unfathomable level of power in the music industry, which he constantly leveraged over anyone he could. After all, Cassie first signed to Bad Boy Entertainment when she was only 19 and Diddy was 37. Just the age gap alone is enough to cause concern, never mind the fact that Diddy also insisted she refer to him as Pop Pop, upon learning that was the nickname she gave her grandfather. The two reportedly met for the first time back in 2005 and began dating shortly after Diddy co-produced the Young Star's debut album, signing Cassie to an exorbitant 10-album deal as outlined in the lawsuit, which is an insane number of albums, by the way. For perspective, Taylor Swift released 10 albums over a 16-year time frame, just to give you an idea of how long a term something like this could last. And I can't help but imagine this was one of the very first control tactics Diddy employed against Cassie. Roping her into such a predatory, drawn-out record deal seems to me like another way for Diddy to maintain authority and demonstrate the sheer extent of his influence in the industry. Influence that he would also leverage in 2007 when he paid a promoter to create a fake flyer for an event that didn't exist. It was meant to convince Cassie to fly out to Miami, Florida without her then boyfriend by using the guise of a legitimate event she had to attend. As the lawsuit states, she was stunned at how easily Mr. Combs was able to recruit others to lie for him. From there, it was a constant whirlwind of Diddy flaunting his celebrity status and asserting possession and control over her to the point where all aspects of Miss Ventura's life were controlled by either Mr. Combs or his management companies, as the suit put it. Compounding this all-encompassing intrusion into her life, it continues, Mr. Combs secured his control over the young and impressionable Miss Ventura by introducing her to a drug-fueled lifestyle that kept her complacent and compliant, reportedly giving out pills to Cassie as if they were candy starting in 2008. Not an uncommon tactic for abusers. We've seen it with Jeffrey Epstein when he would drug the many girls he kept around to intentionally obfuscate their memories later on. With Diddy, the lawsuit alleges he had exhausted his own supply of pills and couldn't get any more for his prescription, so he demanded Cassie procure prescriptions of her own in order to keep the drugs flowing under her name. The suit states very plainly that the next decade of Cassie's life was spent trapped in a devastating cycle of abuse, violence, and sex trafficking at the hands of her former partner and boss. For over 10 years, Diddy refused to let Cassie leave his side, taking drastic measures to relentlessly terrorize the young artist throughout the course of their nightmarish relationship. During an especially strenuous time of her relationship with Diddy in 2011, for example, Cassie was actually in a brief relationship with Kid Cudi and would seek refuge at his home to escape the wrath of her abuser. Though upon stealing her phone and finding an email exchange between Cudi and Cassie, Diddy flung into a fit of rage and tried to attack Cassie with a sharp corkscrew lodged between his fingers. She escaped to Cudi's house that night, only to return later when she felt as though she could never outrun Diddy and his many enforcers. The suit then alleges he hit her and kicked her in the back as she tried to escape again. Her parents later took photos of her bruises from this incident, and after a few months, Diddy allegedly told Cassie that he was planning to blow up Kid Cudi's car and wanted to be sure Cudi would be home when it happened. Sure enough, Cudi's car exploded in his own driveway shortly after. Other than a single tweet in 2014 from a man claiming he had heard rumors of Diddy setting Kid Cudi's car on fire for messing around with Cassie, the event remained largely in the shadows until this recent lawsuit, only for Cudi to turn around and confirm confirmed to the New York Times that it did in fact take place. A horrifying incident that further emphasized not only the immense power and connections Diddy maintained, but the depraved measures he would take to keep Cassie compliant. One particularly concerning passage from the lawsuit happens on page 22, which notes that in March 2016, Diddy became intoxicated during an FO at the now closed Intercontinental Hotel in Century City, LA, where he punched Cassie in the face, giving her a black eye. Diddy later fell asleep and Cassie saw an opportunity to escape. Only unfortunately, on her way out of the room, Diddy woke up and immediately charged down the hallway after her, grabbing her from behind as she attempted to get into the elevator. Diddy violently threw Cassie to the floor and kicked her multiple times while she laid there in a fetal position before attempting to drag her back to his room. Cassie did manage to soon leave in a taxi, but not before her partner threw a glass vase at her. And I am using slightly more descriptive language here than the lawsuit because I have actually seen the incident by now, and you probably have too. When CCTV footage of the assault leaked to CNN in May, about 6 months after Cassie made this initial allegation in court. In case you're wondering why this tape wasn't made public any sooner, the lawsuit explains that Diddy paid the hotel $50 grand for the hallway footage from that evening. Who exactly received that money remains unclear, but what we do know for certain is that this footage only solidified what we had already heard about Diddy's abusive tendencies. Following its release, Cassie's lawyer told the media, "The gut-wrenching video has only further confirmed the disturbing and predatory behavior of Mr. Combs. Words cannot express the courage and fortitude that Miss Ventura has shown in coming forward to bring this to light." The overwhelming media spotlight even forced Diddy himself to come out of the shadows and make his own shitty 1-minute YouTuber apology video. But before we watch that, I want you to hear Diddy's original statement regarding the allegations Cassie and others had made against him in late 2023. This past December, Diddy wrote, "Enough is enough. For the last couple of weeks, I have sat silently and watched people try to assassinate my character, destroy my reputation and my legacy. Sickening allegations have been made against me by individuals looking for a quick payday. Let me be absolutely clear. I did not do any of the awful things being alleged." Keep in mind, he's also talking about the hotel incident here. "I will fight for my name, my family, and for the truth." Unfortunately for Diddy, that truth only exposed him as the abusive, lying monster that he is. On that note, though, here's his apology.
It's so difficult to reflect on the darkest times in your life. Sometimes you gotta do that.
Right off the bat, I've gotta say how much I hate Diddy doing this little, "Oh, I'm so sorry" voice. Oh, it's so difficult to reflect on those dark times. Were those times dark for you, though? Or for Cassie? Though I don't doubt he's going through some dark times right now. On top of having the Department of Homeland Security raid both of his properties not long ago, the entire world has now just witnessed irrefutable evidence of Diddy being the abusive pile of shit we already knew he was. This is just visual confirmation. The idea that Diddy even thought he could make a video like this speaks to the overwhelming egotistical power trip he's constantly on. We are really witnessing right now the mind-numbing levels of narcissism described so vividly in the myriad of lawsuits. Nothing he says in this video could ever possibly vindicate him. But let's watch him try.
I was f***ed up. I mean, I hit rock bottom. But I make no excuses.
Yeah, you haven't been making excuses. You've been lying through your teeth when you tried to say the allegations were all false. You knew this video existed, and yet you still put out that garbage statement denying everything. You've shown you're a deceitful moron, and that's why no one believes you when you say,
"I take full responsibility for my actions in that video. I'm disgusted. I was disgusted then when I did it, I'm disgusted now."
No, you're not, and no, you weren't. You still continued to abuse Cassie and others for years after this incident. And even if by chance you were disgusted with yourself, you still beat a woman to a pulp. Are we supposed to have any shred of sympathy? You're supposed to be in jail!
I went and I sought out professional help. I had to go into therapy. Going to rehab.
You absolutely didn't, but even if you did, it didn't work because, again, there are lawsuits from other people who have alleged extremely similar things in the years following that hotel incident. Does he think we just don't know about the other allegations? Are we supposed to take his word on this or something? He already lied!
I had to ask God for his mercy and grace.
It's kind of impressive Diddy has managed to be in so many movies with acting skills this abhorrent.
I'm so sorry. But I'm committed to be a better man each and every day. not asking for forgiveness.
Well, good, because no one on the planet was going to forgive you anyway. And I have to point out that we aren't the ones that need apologizing to. Go apologize to Cassie, along with the rest of your countless victims, man. I don't know why you're talking to us. Your reputation is gone, obliterated, never to be revived again. And it's laughable to think a measly minute-long apology video on Instagram is even maybe gonna be enough to salvage it. Besides, most people already figured he was guilty anyway. He kind of tipped his hand a bit after he, I don't know, settled the lawsuit the day after it was filed. Not really the mark of an innocent man right there, is it? He made it obvious right then that he wanted these allegations shoved back under the rug as quickly as possible, hoping to bring as little media attention to it as he could. But these efforts ultimately fell flat. Diddy couldn't keep the truth hidden forever, and he absolutely wasn't prepared for the onslaught of lawsuits that came not even a week after Cassie's was settled, blindsided by 2 more bombshell suits by 2 separate victims on Thanksgiving Day, making for what I imagine was a pretty uncomfortable dinner in the Combs household that night. The first suit was filed by a woman named Joy Dickerson Neal, who described the substantial and lifetime injuries she suffered as a result of being drugged, essayed, and abused, and alleged she was the victim of revenge porn that Sean Combs, or P. Diddy, created and distributed. Joy first came into contact with Diddy back when she was a student at Syracuse University in 1991. Sharing some mutual friends, Joy had also appeared in one of Diddy's early music videos and reluctantly agreed to a dinner with the rapper in Harlem. As the suit puts it, getting into Combs' car that day was something Miss Dickerson would come to regret forever, claiming Diddy drugged her, took her to a nearby recording studio, and essayed her while she was in a physical state where she could not independently stand or walk, as described in the lawsuit. Joy found out later that Diddy had recorded the entire assault against her will, as it was his practice, only finding out about the tape when a friend told her he had seen it along with other men. In fact, according to him, everyone had seen the video. The shoot goes on to describe the emotional and mental tailspin she endured from there, returning to college only to be admitted to the hospital for severe depression and suicidal ideation. The essay and public exposure of it caused her to suffer overwhelming feelings of humiliation, embarrassment, violation, and constant apprehension about who all viewed it, the lawsuit states. Still today, Miss Dickerson continues to work on her emotional health, economic recovery, and finishing her college degree. Seeking accountability from Combs under the law is one more step in that journey. Diddy has since referred to these claims as a money grab, one of his favorite ways to write off the many accusations that have been made about him, as we'll soon see. And despite his best efforts to dismiss these claims, this is not the only legal filing Diddy has to worry about, because hours after this one was filed, another woman named Liza Gardner went public with her claims that Diddy violently raped her alongside a man named Aaron Hall when she was just 16 years old. Liza was just a high school student when she met the 2 men at the offices of MCA Records in 1990, alleging that Diddy and Hall were very flirtatious and handsy with Liza and her friend, offering them alcohol and inviting them back to Hall's apartment for an after party. Keep in mind, these were kids. They were in the presence of adults who they didn't think would hurt them. The lawsuit claims that after Diddy coerced the young girl into sex, she was still laying on the bed traumatized when Hall then barged into the room, pinned her down, and raped her as well. Afterwards, Liza ran out and met up with her friend later that night, where she learned that she too had been forced to have sex with the 2 men in a different room, it states. The lawsuit also claims that when Combs finished with Liza Gardner, he and Hall switched, and they commenced assaulting Liza Gardner's friend. But that's not even where the nightmare ended, as a couple days later, Liza claims an irate Diddy showed up at the house where she and her friend were staying to assault and choke Liza to the point where she passed out. Apparently, he was afraid they would tell the girl he was dating at the time. Again, Diddy referred to these claims through a representative as a money grab. By the way, in case you've never heard of Aaron Hall and were wondering who he is, here's an extremely sickening clip I found of him talking about women.
Can't no out there say that she handled my shit. You know, a whole lot of girls out there with the umbilical cords, them young 1970s, 1980s bitches. Yeah. You know what I mean? They try to go up there with the, you know, with the fresh out the pussy shit and think they can get like Aaron Hall. I'm historical dick. I like for them niggas to see how I fuck. Like if you speak to Jodeci or Puffy or any of them niggas, they been at my house. They all see me fuck. They all know I'm a big nigga.
But this wasn't even the last time Diddy was accused of assaulting a minor specifically, as the next lawsuit, filed anonymously on December 2nd, alleged Diddy and several other recording executives, quote, gang raped a 17-year-old girl after flying her out to his studio on a private jet. While we don't know the identity of the victim, this lawsuit actually provides censored images of the girl supposedly touring the studio and even sitting on Diddy's lap. The lawsuit makes sure to emphasize how she was only in 11th grade when she first met Diddy, who was twice her age, along with then president of Bad Boy Entertainment, Harvey Pierre, and a third unnamed assailant in 2003. As stated in the lawsuit, while at the studio, Mr. Combs and his associates, including Mr. Pierre, plied Miss Doe with drugs and alcohol. As the night wore on, the 17-year-old Miss Doe became more and more inebriated, eventually to the point where she could not possibly have consented to having sex with anyone, much less someone twice her age. During the alleged gang rape, the victim claims Diddy complained he could not, quote, get off unless the victim pinched his nipples as hard as she could. The suit goes on to describe the three men taking turns assaulting the victim in excruciating detail until she finally collapsed in the restroom alone, her genitalia in pain. She couldn't even walk out of the building without assistance. She then flew back home to Michigan, where she would have to live with the traumatic memories for the next 20 years. Hall and Diddy have both denied these claims, with Diddy's attorneys making him out to be a victim of, quote, cancel culture in front of a judge. Good luck arguing that one in front of a jury. And even then, it won't be the only jury he'll need to win over.
The lawsuit also claims the misconduct happened during the creation of Diddy's latest album, the Love album, and is seeking, as we've mentioned, $30 million. The suit not only names the mogul, but includes his son.
As of February 26, 2024, producer Rodney Lil Rod Jones is suing not just P. Diddy, but an entire gaggle of the mogul's friends and family who he asserts make up a much larger RICO criminal enterprise. He refers to these individuals by name, citing their specific roles within Diddy's illicit crime syndicate, and claims he has secured plenty of evidence in regard to the drugs Diddy acquires, uses, and distributes, along with the unregistered guns he possesses and distributes, stating he can prove that Diddy has provided laced alcoholic beverages to minors and sex workers at his various properties, which, side note, did not know Diddy liked to rent yachts and take trips to the Virgin Islands, which sounds a bit familiar to me. A billionaire being accused of sex trafficking who also hangs out on the Virgin Islands? I mean, come on, man. Jones even compares Diddy's chief of staff, Christina Coram, to Ghislaine Maxwell in this very lawsuit. One more side note, why does Diddy have a chief of staff? Is he the president? I mean, what does this lady even do? Well, if you ask Lil Rod, she procures drugs for Diddy and willingly abets and downplays the nature of the man's behavior, allegedly telling him, you know, Sean will be Sean, when Lil Rod expressed to her his discomfort with Diddy's unwanted sexual advances towards him. Christina was quick to write it off as just friendly horseplay, according to the lawsuit, which also makes sure to clarify this was not just horseplay. We're talking about unauthorized groping and touching of Jones's anus and genitals, as written in the suit. Christina allegedly told Jones it was just Diddy's way of showing that he likes him. As the suit puts it, Mr. Jones believes that KK aided and abetted Mr. Combs' essay of him and was working with Mr. Combs to groom him into accepting a homosexual relationship. The next few pages describe the various ways in which Jones says Diddy made sexual advances, even going so far as to say he used one of Jones's favorite producers, Stevie J, to entice Mr. Jones to engage in gay sex, alleging Diddy shared a video of Stevie J anally penetrating a Caucasian male without a condom. According to Mr. Combs, this is a normal practice in the music industry. Look, even Stevie J is doing it. Going on to include alleged screenshots from that very video, and even going further by alleging Diddy spoke about engaging in intercourse with a rapper and R&B singer whose names are both redacted. However, at the bottom of the page, you'll notice, are hints as to who these people are. It has led readers to speculate that the Philadelphia rapper in question, who it says dated Nicki Minaj, is Meek Mill, and the R&B singer who has performed at the Super Bowl and has a Vegas residency is Usher. While Usher has yet to make a statement himself, Meek has certainly not shied away from a response by taking to Twitter and writing this. I don't think it's necessary for me to read this out loud. You can pause and read for yourself, but his point is very clear. This wasn't even his only tweet on the matter. He was going on like this for days, and I'm sorry to say, we really don't have time to get into it here. I don't really think anyone should be focusing on the sexualities of Meek or Usher or anyone else involved here anyway. I mean, that should be the least prescient part of all of this, unless of course there wasn't consent, but we currently don't have much information on that front yet. What we do know is that Mr. Jones, or Lil Rod, is claiming that he was assaulted not just by Diddy, but also Young Miami's female cousin as well, who, as the lawsuit claims, groped Mr. Jones in the bathroom of Diddy's house in November 2022. Lil Rod believes she was sent in by Diddy to assault him and says she did not accept his rejection, following him out of the bathroom where he says she attempted to straddle him and have sex with him in the presence of Mr. Combs and his staff. The suit even includes photos from Diddy's house supposedly taken right before this assault. The accusation that Diddy left Lil Rod alone to get assaulted by one of his friends is one that comes back up later in the suit, unfortunately, where he says Diddy tried to pass him off to actor Cuba Gooding Jr. on the mogul's yacht. The suit states that Diddy suggested Cuba get to know Mr. Jones better. After leaving the two alone in a makeshift studio, Lil Rod claims Cuba began touching, groping, and fondling his legs, his upper inner thighs near his groin, the small of his back, and his shoulders. He rejected his advances, and Mr. Gooding Jr. did not stop until Mr. Jones forcibly pushed him away, it states. These claims were accompanied by photo evidence depicting Cuba, Diddy, and Lil Rod all hanging out together in a small, dimly lit studio, reportedly taken shortly before the incident happened, and even included this uncomfortable photo of Cuba's arm wrapped tightly around Lil Rod against his will, as it clarifies. Lil Rod also alleges he was transported by Diddy from state to state and forced to sleep with sex workers against his will for Diddy's enjoyment. In February 2023, he says he recalls being drugged by the mogul before waking up in a bed with two sex workers and Diddy himself. The suit outlines a number of times Lil Rod was ordered to recruit sex workers, at one point being given an exclusive bad boy baseball cap and instructed to wear it to a Miami club as a signal to any sex worker he approached that Mr. Combs was in town and had sent Mr. Jones to recruit them. Apparently, these workers were accustomed to servicing Mr. Combs and would know that he is in town by the sight of the bad boy's baseball cap, even including photos of the alleged sex workers he solicited that night. But even more concerning is Lil Rod's assertion that there were underage girls around Diddy as well, frequently, describing one specific listening party where Diddy, his son, sex workers, underage girls, and a redacted R&B singer were all present. Just like the other redacted names, the lawsuit leaves us some clues at the bottom of the page, clarifying that this artist is also a Grammy Award winner and has gotten into legal trouble when he assaulted a Bajan billionaire. I don't know if I need to tell you, but obviously people assume this person was Chris Brown. It's not like it would be out of character for him to surround himself with sketchy people like Diddy. And just so there is no confusion on what the suit alleges, I think it's best if I read this next part out verbatim. The event began at 7 p.m. Mr. Combs requested female sex workers and required Mr. Jones to solicit them. An hour later, several sex workers appeared. In addition to sex workers, there were at least 5 girls in the crowd that were under the age of 16. Mr. Combs forced all the women to drink laced De Leon liquor. Upon information and belief, Mr. Combs laced the liquor with ecstasy. Mr. Combs did not check the identification of any of these underage girls. The presence of these underage girls made Mr. Jones very uncomfortable. He attempted to leave, and Mr. Combs forced him to stay. Mr. Combs went so far as to take Mr. Jones's car keys to prevent him from leaving. After being forced to drink laced De Leon shots, Mr. Jones began feeling lightheaded and recalls passing out and waking up at 4 a.m. the following morning naked with the sex workers sleeping next to him. These allegations came with more screenshots from a video supposedly taken that evening, depicting Diddy and his son partying with who Lil Rod described as underage girls. girls. Similar to the Cassie case, this suit paints a vivid picture of Diddy using his seemingly endless power to intimidate Lil Rod into doing his bidding out of fear of retaliation. I think we're all aware at this point just how dangerous of an individual Diddy has made himself out to be, and I can't imagine how paralyzed Lil Rod must have felt during the year he spent with the man. I mean, just look at what happened at the very beginning of their time together. September 2022, the very same month he began working with Diddy, Lil Rod claims he heard a series of gunshots coming out from a studio bathroom. When he went in to check on the commotion, Lil Rod says he saw Diddy and his son Justin exiting the bathroom, leaving Justin's friend G curled up on the floor holding his stomach, bleeding out of his leg and hip area. According to the suit, Lil Rod helped G get out of the front door where an ambulance was waiting and recalled Diddy telling him and the rest of the crew to lie to police that G was shot outside as a result of a drive-by shooting, which is in fact the narrative the media went with at the time because that's what they had been told, despite these photos that seem to depict the aftermath of said shooting with blood smeared all over the floor and toilet seat of the restroom. In fact, Lil Rod himself believes the clothing he wore that day still contains blood stains and DNA from G. The lawsuit also states there are witnesses who have corroborated this series of events anonymously out of fear of Diddy, but are still willing to go public if necessary.
Claims made by Jones include hidden cameras in the rap mogul's home, saying, quote, Mr. Combs allegedly threatened to eat Mr. Jones's face in order to get what he wants.
The Lil Rod lawsuit is damning, and probably the one Diddy is least excited to deal with if it ever goes to a jury, as Lil Rod has requested. Due to the overwhelming level of evidence presented in these documents, it looks like Diddy might really be fucking cooked this time. I can only imagine what was found when the Department of Homeland Security raided 2 of his homes back in March. Although, to be fair, I have seen reports that say he was tipped off beforehand, which is probably why he wasn't at either location as heavily armed agents broke his door down. We do know the feds confiscated electronic devices and hard drives. A few of his associates have been arrested, including his alleged drug mule being busted for trying to carry contraband through TSA. It doesn't look to me like Lil Rod was lying about this guy. As of today, Diddy himself still has yet to be indicted, and the feds have been pretty tight-lipped about their ongoing investigation. But I am glad to see them taking their time on this, at least. It makes me hope they're working to build a case that is so airtight it will be near impossible for Diddy to wiggle his way out. Only time will tell. In the meantime, he still has plenty of other lawsuits to occupy himself with, like the 4 additional ones that were filed after these raids. One woman by the name of Grace O. Markaya is currently pressing charges against Diddy and his son Christian, who she says assaulted her on his billionaire dad's yacht where she worked as a stewardess. According to the suit, Grace witnessed some very concerning things while working on that yacht. That women would frequently pass out after just 1 shot of tequila, leading her to believe the drinks were laced with drugs. The suit outlines how Christian pressured her to take a few of these shots before assaulting her one night, grabbing her breasts and genitals without consent, and even includes a transcript as the entire interaction had been thankfully recorded by Lil Rod. You can read very plainly here that Grace repeatedly demanded Christian take his hands off of her, yet he doesn't stop until she finally manages to escape. Later in the night, however, the suit states Grace was cornered by Christian in another, more secluded area of the yacht where he allegedly began removing his clothes, grabbed his arms, and tried to force her to perform oral copulation on him, stating that Grace began fighting him off, but before long, her partner entered the room, which startled Christian and allowed Grace the chance to finally leave. Even after this one, though, 3 additional lawsuits have now come out. 2 in May and 1 in July, literally as I was working on this video. In fact, it's pretty likely that even after this video goes up, we'll see more lawsuits against Diddy. I'm convinced. He's wronged so many people, and now they're all coming out of the woodwork at the same time. It's really wild to witness. The first of this recent wave was filed by a model named Crystal McKinney, who claims she was drugged and assaulted by Diddy after meeting meeting him at a fashion event in 2003. Promising to help her make it big in the industry, the lawsuit states Diddy invited Crystal back to his hotel room where he handed her a laced blunt, making sure she was highly inebriated before following her into the bathroom where he allegedly began kissing her without consent, shoving her head down to his crotch, and commanding her to suck it, as the suit claims. She says she recalls remembering waking up in a taxi after passing out. She then realized what had happened and says she's kept her clothes from that event sealed in plastic wrap to this day. The second lawsuit from May, filed only 2 days after Crystal's, came from a woman named April Lampros, who claims to have been assaulted by Diddy 4 separate times from the mid-90s to early 2000s, each event laid out in horrifying detail throughout the 22-page document. The first alleged assault took place after the two went drinking in Houston. April, who didn't drink at the time, felt pressure to do so by Diddy and says she felt strangely uneasy after just a few sips and remembers being ushered back to Diddy's hotel room where she says he forced himself on top of her, kissed her, and began removing her clothes despite her repeatedly telling him that she wasn't feeling well. Ignoring her words, Diddy is alleged to have raped April despite her telling him to stop over and over. For the next few months, she says, Diddy showered her in gifts, and hoping that he had maybe changed after enough time, ended up meeting up with him again to discuss how he could help her in the world of music and fashion. After regaining her trust, April says Diddy assaulted her again in a parking garage, forcing his penis into her mouth while a parking attendant stood by and watched. Despite her best efforts to distance herself, Diddy came back with more gifts and empty promises. When she continued to refuse his advances, however, she says Diddy's attitude became more irate than ever before. Taking on a sort of mob boss persona, Diddy would call her all the time and threaten to beat her and anyone else who was home with her. She says he knew where she lived and worked and felt constantly trapped by Diddy. He would constantly threaten to ruin her dreams of pursuing a career in the entertainment world if she did not comply with his demands, the lawsuit states. One night when she was over at his house, she says he forced both her and his then partner Kim Porter to ingest ecstasy, shoving the pills down their throats and even checking under their tongues to make sure they swallowed, according to the suit. Despite April's objections, he ordered the two women to have sex in front of him, masturbating to the encounter before allegedly pushing Kim off of April and raping her. She didn't see Diddy again for years until they ran into each other at Rockefeller Center around 2001. He told her he missed her and later called her to try and get her to come over, though she continued to refuse. He called again a few days later, and she reluctantly and regrettably allowed him to visit, as the suit put it. His security came with him, she says, which made her feel a bit better. He showered her with compliments and apologized for his past behavior, but began dropping hints about the two having sex again, the lawsuit states. When she rejected these advancements, she alleges he violently grabbed her, forced himself onto her, and kissed her without consent. Thankfully, she fought him off, but realized she had clearly not changed in the slightest. The final lawsuit we'll be covering today comes from Adria English, a former adult film star who was hired as a sex worker at one of Diddy's famous white parties in 2004. She says she was groomed into sex trafficking over time and alleges Diddy demanded her to have sex with a celebrity jeweler by the name of Jacob Arabov. Taking this photo, which is also included in the 114-page lawsuit. She says she continued to be passed around by Diddy even after this encounter, being assaulted by a number of his high-profile clients. Adria also believes Diddy has hidden cameras in every room of his many homes, a claim we also see being made in the Lil Rod lawsuit. Diddy's lawyer responded to Adria's claims by telling TMZ no matter how many lawsuits are filed, it won't change the fact that Mr. Combs has never essayed or sex trafficked anyone. We live in a world where anyone can file a lawsuit for any reason and without any proof. Fortunately, a fair and impartial judicial process exists to find the truth, and Mr. Combs is confident he will prevail against these and other baseless claims in court. I've linked all 9 current lawsuits against Diddy down below in the description for you to read for yourself. Every single one paints a very disturbing picture of Diddy's inner world, and I would encourage you to continue educating yourself on the ongoing investigation from here. God knows we aren't anywhere close to the end yet, and it wouldn't surprise me if this goes on for the next few years. There are 3.5 decades worth of Diddy's alleged criminal acts for prosecutors to pore over. The most flooring part of it, however, is that not all of it is new information. This kind of stuff has been circulating for a while now. Kimora Lee Simmons said in an interview with New York Magazine in 2004 that Diddy once threatened to hit her while she was pregnant before getting down on his knees and begging for forgiveness. Gina Huynh, who dated Diddy for 5 years, claimed on a podcast in 2019 that Diddy once stomped on her stomach so hard it took the wind out of her breath, telling Tasha K, "I couldn't breathe. He kept hitting me. I was pleading to him, can't you just stop?" She claims he grabbed her hair and continued to punch the back of her head. Then in 2022, Aubrey O'Day alleged on the Call Her Daddy podcast that Diddy dropped her from his label after she refused to do things for him in other areas than just music. Wendy Williams correctly suspected in 2018 that Diddy was treating Cassie like a possession. These things have not always been hidden very well. It's just now that we're getting to see it all blown open in a way that Diddy himself may have been too narcissistic to ever anticipate. He's always had a tendency to weasel his way out of consequence, whether it be allegedly letting other people take the blame for him, forcing the people around him to lie to law enforcement, or bribing hotel workers with tens of thousands of dollars to keep his abusive nature away from the general public. But when I look at what he's up against now, I really truly believe those days are over. At least that's what I want to believe, for the sake of everyone he's hurt and traumatized over such an extensive period of time. One silver lining that I would like to go ahead and acknowledge here at the end is that Cassie Ventura seems a lot happier now that she's safely away from her ex-partner. She now has a husband and 2 young daughters. This past May, she took to Instagram to write, "Thank you for all of the love and support from my family, friends, strangers, and those I have yet to meet. The outpouring of love has created a place for my younger self to settle and feel safe now, but this is only the beginning. Domestic violence is the issue. It broke me down to someone I never thought I would become. With a lot of hard work, I am better today, but I will always be recovering from my past. Thank you to everyone that has taken the time to take this matter seriously. My only ask is that everyone open your heart to believing victims the first time. It takes a lot of heart to tell the truth out of a situation that you were powerless in. I offer my hand to those that are still living in fear. Reach out to your people. Don't cut them off. No one should carry this weight alone. This healing journey is never ending, but this support means everything to me. Thank you." Well, on the other hand, Diddy is facing what many believe will end in a federal indictment followed by inevitable jail time. And even if he does manage to somehow beat all of these cases, his reputation as a mogul, a producer, an artist is all gone. His image will never recover now that the world can finally see him for the ruthless freak he's always been. I hope at the end of the day his victims can find some sense of solace in knowing his reign of terror is coming to a close at long last.